For over a decade, the world has speculated about the real forces behind Muammar Gaddafi's downfall. Many have pointed fingers at Western intervention, NATO airstrikes, and internal uprisings. But what if one of Africa's own leaders played a key role in the betrayal? Today, Captain Ibrahim Traoré is breaking his silence, revealing shocking details about the African leader who turned against Gaddafi when he needed unity the most. Was it out of fear, greed, or external pressure? And how did this betrayal reshape the fate of not just Libya, but the entire African continent? Stay with us as we uncover the hidden truths behind one of modern history's most controversial betrayals. The history of African revolutionary leaders has been tainted by a recurring pattern. Whenever a visionary leader rises to challenge Western dominance, they are systematically eliminated. However, what is even more disheartening is that the betrayal often comes from within the African continent itself. One of the most tragic examples of this is the downfall of Muammar Gaddafi, the Libyan leader who had grand ambitions for Africa. His dream of a United States of Africa, with a single currency, government, and military, was cut short not only by NATO and France, but also by a fellow African leader whom he once considered a friend. Gaddafi's Pan-African vision. Muammar Gaddafi was a staunch advocate of Pan-Africanism, envisioning a continent free from Western economic control and united under a single currency backed by Libya's vast gold reserves. His dream included a powerful African Union capable of dictating its own terms on the global stage. However, many African leaders opposed his vision, either fearing Western retaliation or unwilling to relinquish their own power. Among them was Yoweri Museveni, Uganda's president, who resisted Gaddafi's push for continental unity. Gaddafi's plan for a unified Africa was not mere rhetoric. He actively worked toward its realization. He engaged in negotiations with various African leaders to establish a centralized economic system and proposed a joint African military force to defend the continent from external threats. The most ambitious part of his vision was the introduction of a gold-backed currency, the gold dinar, aimed at freeing African nations from reliance on the US dollar and the French-controlled CFA franc. Had this plan succeeded, it would have strengthened Africa's economic sovereignty and reduced foreign influence over the continent's resources. However, Gaddafi's vision posed a significant threat to the global financial order. Western powers saw his initiative as a direct challenge to their economic dominance in Africa. Additionally, many African leaders, accustomed to the status quo, refused to support his agenda, fearing the loss of foreign aid and economic ties with the West. Ultimately, Gaddafi's ambitions for African unity and financial independence were met with resistance both from within Africa and beyond, contributing to his downfall. His death in 2011 marked the end of his Pan-African dream, leaving the continent fragmented and still under significant foreign economic influence. A friendship turned sour. Muammar Gaddafi and Yoweri Museveni shared a complex political relationship shaped by mutual support and eventual betrayal. Libya had long backed Uganda, including during Idi Amin's rule. When Museveni fought against Milton Obote's administration, he sought and received military aid from Gaddafi. However, their alliance weakened over time, especially as Gaddafi aggressively promoted the idea of a United States of Africa, a vision Museveni and many other African leaders rejected. Tensions between the two leaders became public in March 2008 when Gaddafi visited Uganda for the inauguration of a mosque named after him. His security detail clashed with Ugandan forces, revealing the growing rift. By 2011, NATO-backed rebels launched an offensive against Gaddafi's government. Museveni remained silent. Leaked documents later suggested that he had played a key role in betraying his former ally, assisting Western powers in their efforts to remove Gaddafi from power. Gaddafi had long warned African leaders about the dangers of Western intervention, cautioning that reliance on Western financial institutions and military alliances would lead to their downfall. Many dismissed his warnings, but his fears were ultimately realized when NATO forces bombed Libya under the pretext of a humanitarian mission. Gaddafi found himself abandoned. Museveni's shift in loyalty demonstrated the fragility of African political alliances in the face of Western influence. While he had once benefited from Gaddafi's support, he aligned himself with the West when Libya was under attack. Gaddafi's assassination in October 2011 marked a turning point for Africa, as Libya descended into chaos. His death not only symbolized the collapse of his vision for a united Africa, but also exposed the political maneuvering of African leaders who prioritized their own survival over regional solidarity. Museveni's secret dealings with the West. Leaked U.S. documents from WikiLeaks reveal that Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni had long maintained a close relationship with the United States, despite his ties with Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. Museveni secretly provided intelligence to the West. He was among the first to alert U.S. officials about Gaddafi's Pan-African ambitions, warning that the Libyan leader sought to unite Africa under one ruler. This alarmed Western powers, as such unity could threaten their economic dominance over the continent. Museveni's cooperation with the West extended beyond Libya. He also provided intelligence on Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe, another African leader who fiercely resisted Western control. According to leaked reports, Museveni advised that the most effective way to weaken Mugabe was to target Zimbabwe's economy, portraying him as an incompetent leader. This tactic aligned with broader Western strategies that sought to manipulate African leaders and destabilize governments that opposed foreign influence. Museveni's actions reflected a pattern in which certain African leaders collaborated with Western powers to secure their own political survival, often at the expense of regional unity. While publicly advocating for African independence, Museveni worked behind the scenes to ensure that resistance against Western dominance remained fragmented. His betrayal of Gaddafi and Mugabe ultimately served Western interests, allowing them to maintain their control over Africa's resources and political landscape. These revelations shed light on the complex power dynamics that shape Africa's relationship with the West. The destruction of Libya. The betrayal by Museveni gave NATO the justification it needed to intervene in Libya, leading to catastrophic consequences. Once a thriving nation with the highest standard of living in Africa, Libya descended into chaos following the removal of Muammar Gaddafi. The country, once a beacon of stability and prosperity, is now a failed state, plagued by civil war, economic collapse, and human trafficking. Under Gaddafi, Libya enjoyed free healthcare, free education, and subsidized necessities like electricity and fuel. One of his most ambitious projects was the Great Man-Made River, a massive irrigation project that provided fresh water to the Libyan people. However, NATO forces bombed this critical infrastructure in 2011, severely destabilizing the country. Gaddafi's removal created a power vacuum, which rival factions quickly filled, leading to a fractured and divided nation. The absence of a central government allowed extremist groups to flourish, making Libya a breeding ground for terrorism. These groups exploited the chaos, further complicating efforts for peace and stability. The country now faces constant armed conflict, with no functional government to address its citizens' needs. What was once one of Africa's most prosperous nations is now a war-torn, lawless land. The promise of a united and prosperous Libya was shattered, and the impact of NATO's intervention continues to be felt, with the country struggling to recover from its descent into anarchy. Gaddafi's greatest crime, challenging Western hegemony. The real reason the West sought to remove Muammar Gaddafi was not because he was a dictator, as they claimed, but because he posed a significant threat to their control over Africa's resources and financial systems. One of Gaddafi's most ambitious initiatives was the introduction of a gold-backed African currency, the gold dinar. His goal was to create a unified currency that would free African nations from their dependence on the US dollar and the French-controlled CFA franc. This move would have directly challenged the financial dominance that Western powers maintained over the continent for decades. The introduction of the gold dinar was seen as a revolutionary idea that could shift Africa's economic power away from the West and create a more self-sufficient continent. Gaddafi's proposal to move away from Western currencies would have weakened the financial grip of former colonial powers and reduced their ability to exploit African resources. This plan was a direct challenge to the established financial system and would have undermined the West's economic leverage over African nations. French intelligence reportedly became aware of Gaddafi's plan early in the Libyan crisis, which played a crucial role in influencing French President Nicolas Sarkozy's decision to push for military intervention. The subsequent NATO-led military campaign resulted in the downfall of Gaddafi's regime, effectively ending his vision of a financially independent Africa. Leaked emails from then U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton further confirmed the West's concerns about Gaddafi's financial independence efforts. The emails revealed that the West was deeply alarmed by Gaddafi's plans to challenge their economic control. Ultimately, Gaddafi's push for a gold-backed currency was seen as an existential threat to the financial system that the West had long used to maintain dominance over Africa. A repeated pattern of betrayal. The betrayal of African revolutionaries by their own people is a tragic and recurring theme in history. Leaders like Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso, Patrice Lumumba of the Congo, and Muammar Gaddafi all sought to free Africa from Western exploitation, only to be betrayed by fellow Africans who acted as proxies for foreign interests. These leaders dreamed of a united and self-sufficient Africa, but their efforts were thwarted by internal divisions and external manipulation. Despite the lessons of history, many African leaders continue to align themselves with Western powers, often prioritizing personal gain over the collective good of their people. This pattern of betrayal undermines the unity and progress that Africa desperately needs. Gaddafi's downfall is a stark reminder that African unity is seen as the greatest threat to foreign exploitation. Until African leaders begin to prioritize the continent's collective interests over personal and foreign alliances, this cycle of betrayal will persist. The failure to learn from past mistakes will continue to hinder Africa's progress and perpetuate its dependence on external forces. The lesson is clear. True liberation for Africa can only be achieved when leaders put aside personal ambitions and work together for the greater good of the continent. A lesson for the future. The tragic downfall of Gaddafi should serve as a lesson for current and future African leaders. The West will always oppose any movement that seeks to make Africa independent. But true progress will only come when African nations stand together. Leaders must learn from the past and resist the influence of external forces that seek to divide and control the continent. As we reflect on the legacy of Gaddafi, we must ask ourselves, how many more leaders will Africa lose before it finally breaks free from the cycle of betrayal and neocolonialism? And will the current leaders of Africa learn from the past or repeat the same mistakes? The future of Africa depends on the choices made today. Let history not repeat itself. Are African nations truly in control of their own destinies? Or are hidden forces still pulling the strings from behind the scenes? Captain Traoré's revelations have opened a door to difficult but necessary conversations. This isn't just about history, it's about the present and the future of Africa. As we reflect on this betrayal, let's ask ourselves, can Africa ever unite to resist foreign influence? Will leaders learn from the past? Or will history repeat itself? What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And let's get this conversation started. And don't forget, if you want to stay informed on Africa's untold stories, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The truth must be heard. And together, we'll make sure it is.